Welcome to Blessed Be the Breakdown, the podcast where I dissect The Handmaid's Tale, explore its themes, and uncover the real-world parallels that make it all the more terrifying. Season 3 of The Handmaid's Tale is about resistance, sacrifice, and the consequences of rebellion. June takes on a leadership role in the fight against Gilead. Serena grapples with her choices, and alliances shift as characters struggle for power and survival. If you haven't watched the show yet, I highly recommend it to fully understand what I'm discussing. So let's dive in. Before we get into the details of Season 3, let's compare its core themes with those of Season 2. Season 2, we really saw the consequences of rebellion. Themes included psychological warfare and public spectacle, motherhood as a weapon, stripping identity and silencing women, the cost of belief in the system, and the evolution of resistance. In Season 3, we're really seeing the power struggle and the cracks in Gilead. Some of the themes we see are revenge and power reclaimed, the fragility of Gilead, mothers and children. Once again, you can't have The Handmaid's Tale without mothers and children, resistance and sacrifice, and power and betrayal. At the end of Season 2, we saw June had the chance to escape Gilead with her baby Nicole. But instead, she handed Nicole to Emily and stayed behind. It's a decision that sets the tone for Season 3, which is full of rebellion, shifting alliances, and some of the most harrowing moments we've seen yet. In the first episode, we see Emily successfully escapes to Canada with June's baby Nicole and is granted asylum. June, with the help of Commander Lawrence, attempts to get Hannah, but is caught and warned by Miss Mackenzie to stop traumatizing her daughter. June's attempt to retrieve Hannah is driven by an unrelenting maternal instinct. She is willing to take enormous risks to reunite with her daughter. However, her capture and Miss Mackenzie's warnings serve as a harsh wake-up call. From June's perspective, every moment Hannah spends in Gilead is a moment of danger and indoctrination, reinforcing her urgency. But Miss Mackenzie, who has been raising Hannah, sees things differently. She views June's repeated interference as disruptive and distressing for Hannah, suggesting these attempts are doing more harm than good. This confrontation forces June to confront a painful paradox. While she sees herself as Hannah's true mother, fighting to save her, she must also acknowledge that Hannah has adapted to her life in Gilead, and now sees the Mackenzies as her family. This realization deepens June's anguish, as it suggests that even if she were to succeed in rescuing Hannah, she might not fully understand or welcome the reunion. Additionally, Miss Mackenzie's warning highlights Gilead's power over June. No matter how hard she fights, she is still at the mercy of a system that has stripped her of her parental rights. The scene reinforces the psychological torment June endures. This constant hope and devastation, the feeling of helplessness, and the painful knowledge that every failed attempt may be pushing Hannah further away emotionally. It is a cruel reminder that in Gilead, even love is weaponized against those who resist. This season, we see Serena's loyalty to Gilead has taken a profound psychological shift, one that has been building over the course of The Handmaid's Tale. Her devastation over losing Nicole is not just the pain of a mother separated from her child, it is the culmination of an internal battle between her loyalty to Gilead and her growing realization of its moral depravity. When Fred urges her to call the authorities, Serena's refusal and her suggestion to give June more time to escape signal a critical turning point. This is an act of both defiance and self-liberation. For much of her life, Serena has been complicit in Gilead's regime, believing in its ideology, to the extent that it aligned with her ambitions and gave her a sense of purpose. However, her experience as a mother to Nicole has awakened something deeper, genuine maternal love that supersedes Gilead's rigid authoritarian rule. Serena's decision to aid in Nicole's escape is an act of resolving inner conflict. She has long justified the suffering of handmaids and other women in Gilead, but now she is confronted with the undeniable truth that the system she helped create is unfit for the child she loves. By choosing Nicole's freedom over her own position in Gilead, she is finally aligning her actions with a new emerging belief system, one that contradicts everything she once fought for. her confrontation with Fred is equally significant. By admitting she did what was best for her child, she is not only standing by her decision, but also asserting a form of agency she rarely exercises in their marriage. Fred, who is used to wielding power over Serena, is caught off guard. This moment disrupts their traditional dynamic, where Serena has often been both victim and enforcer of Gilead's laws, and instead positions her as someone willing to undermine the very foundation of their world for the sake of love. Fred's realization that Serena played a direct role in Nicole's escape marks a turning point in their relationship. His authority over her is weakened, and the trust between them is further eroded. More than that, it represents a loss of control, something that men like Fred cling to desperately in Gilead. Serena, on the other hand, is experiencing an evolution, one rooted in grief, love, and a growing recognition that she can no longer abide by the rules of the world she helped create. When June returns to the Waterfords instead of escaping with Nicole, the emotional fallout is immediate and intense. Serena is devastated, not just because Nicole is gone, but because June, whom she entrusted with her daughter's future, chose to stay behind. This moment is deeply personal for Serena. For all her contradictions, she genuinely wanted Nicole to have a better life. And in her mind, June was supposed to be the one to ensure that. Her anger is layered with grief, frustration, and perhaps even guilt, as she realizes that she will never see the child she fought so hard to keep. Meanwhile, Commander Waterford is unraveling. He is not only furious, but visibly shaken, his composure slipping as he processes what has just happened. His words, "You've killed us all," reflect his fear that their betrayal will have far-reaching consequences. Fred is a man who thrives on control, on the illusion that he is always one step ahead. But now, with Nicole gone and Serena openly defying him, his world is crumbling. His anger is not just about Nicole. It's about the realization that his wife and Handmaid, the two women he believed were beneath him, have outmaneuvered him. After the initial confrontation with the Waterfords, we see Nick and June's confrontation, which is raw and painful. He, more than anyone, understands the cost of resistance. He knows that people put everything on the line to get her out, and sees her choice to stay as a selfish one. Not because he does not understand her love for Hannah, but because he knows how Gilead operates. He has no illusions. There won't be another chance, and her refusal to escape, in his eyes, is a death sentence. His words are not just meant to hurt her. They're a brutal truth, spoken out of anger, frustration, and love. So when he tells her that she is not going to make it out of Gilead alive, her response is, "I know that." And it is a chilling acceptance. She is fully aware of what she has chosen. She is not naive enough to believe that she will get out again, nor does she expect mercy. But her love for Hannah, her unwillingness to leave her daughter behind, has solidified her path. It is not just defiance anymore, it is a sacrifice. She is prepared to die in Gilead if it means fighting for Hannah. This entire sequence is a powerful reflection of June's transformation. She is no longer just a victim trying to escape. She is a warrior, choosing to stay and fight, fully aware of the cost. Meanwhile, Serena, Fred, and Nick are each grappling with their own versions of loss. Whether it is the loss of a child, power, or hope, the scene serves as a stark reminder that in Gilead, every choice comes with devastating consequences. However, in true Fred fashion, he devises an elaborate plan to protect them from execution, claiming that of Joseph was the one that stole Nicole. In a rare moment of reflection, he admits to Serena that he drove her to desperation, seemingly acknowledging, at least in part, his own role in what happened. However, this realization does little to ease Serena's anguish. Consumed by despair and grief over losing Nicole, she sets fire to the Waterford home, watching as the life she once built goes up in flames. Despite everything between them, June makes a fateful choice. She rushes into the fire and pulls Serena to safety, proving that even in a cruel world such as Gilead, mercy still lingers in unexpected places. Soon after, June is reassigned to Commander Lawrence's household, marking a new chapter in her resistance against Gilead's oppressive regime. Commander Lawrence's character is complex and enigmatic, especially in Season 3. Introduced in Season 2, he is a high-ranking member of the Gilead government, responsible for creating the brutal economic system that supports the regime. Known for his intellectual background in economics, Lawrence is more thoughtful and calculating compared to other commanders like Waterford. Though Lawrence helped Emily escape with baby Nicole, he remains deeply tied in Gilead's oppressive system, leaving June unsure if he is an ally or just another cog in the machine. Throughout Season 3, Lawrence's potential as an ally to June and the Resistance grows, but his true motivations are shrouded in uncertainty, adding tension and complexity to his character. Another key thing we see at the beginning of the season is when Moira and Luke end up meeting Emily to retrieve Nicole, and they also hand Luke a picture of Hannah. We also see that Aunt Lydia is now out of the hospital, and she decides to visit June at the Lawrences. Aunt Lydia questions June about the Lawrences and says that June can tell her if something is going on. Aunt Lydia's interaction with June in this moment is deeply ironic, as it highlights the contradictions in her character and the cracks in her rigid commitment to Gilead's ideology. Aunt Lydia falls when she's trying to view June's room, and we see her clearly unleash her frustration on June, as she shocks her with a cattle prong and tells her she should be on the wall, not at a new posting. We really see Aunt Lydia start to unravel here. Slowly through the season, we see June now entrenched in the Lawrence household, and she becomes increasingly involved in the underground resistance network, driven by a deep need to regain control over her life and push back against Gilead's systematic oppression. Her involvement grows from a desire to protect her own and others' lives to a profound commitment to resistance despite the emotional and physical toll. When a wounded fugitive arrives, June's insistence on helping her reflects her struggle to balance survival with moral obligation. Her decision to help, even when it risks her safety, speaks to her resilience, but also to her growing sense of guilt and responsibility, a common response for those who've been oppressed, as they feel compelled to act, even at great personal risk. When the woman dies, as punishment, Commander Lawrence forces June to dig her grave in the backyard, a grim task that Eleanor Lawrence, his troubled wife, later softens by planting flowers over it. We see Nick, now a newly promoted commander, is being deployed to the war front in Chicago, forcing June to say goodbye. June's one saving grace in Gilead will now no longer be available, taking away her only sense of normalcy. We see Commander Lawrence openly taunting June in front of the other commanders, forcing her to retrieve a book to make a misogynistic point about the supposed usefulness of women. We also see Commander Lawrence test June's morality by making her choose 5 women from a group of captured prisoners to be spared from execution, and instead reassigned as Martha's. Understanding the importance of strategic resistance, she selects women she believes will be useful to the underground network. Meanwhile, Serena, now estranged from Fred, takes refuge with her disapproving mother. The theme of sacrifice runs throughout June's journey, and it reveals a deeper psychological struggle. How much of herself is she willing to sacrifice for the cause? June's emotional arc fluctuates between a sense of duty and self-preservation. Her leadership role in the resistance, marked by her selection of women to spare from execution, showcases her strategic thinking and her growing psychological complexity. She is no longer a passive participant, but an active force in undermining Gilead. This shift is significant, as June gradually takes on a leadership role despite the trauma she's endured. Her choices also underline the theme of power reclaimed. June recognizes that the path to true power in a world like Gilead is through reclaiming the autonomy over one's decisions, even when those decisions come with harsh consequences. As June rises to power, so too does Serena's internal conflict. Now estranged from Fred, Serena's emotional and psychological journey mirrors June's in many ways. Initially complicit in Gilead's system, Serena begins to experience a profound sense of guilt and disillusionment, a shift from her previous unwavering belief in Gilead's ideals. While attending a baptism celebration at the Putnams, we see June play mediator for the Waterfords, brokering a deal in which Serena agrees to return to Fred in exchange for more power in their marriage. At this celebration, we also see Aunt Lydia reasserts her control by brutally beating Janine for daring to ask to return to the Putnam household in front of everybody, commanders and wives. June once again steps in to save Janine by acting as a human shield. At this point, the cracks in Aunt Lydia are clearly starting to show. She is reaching some sort of breaking point. It is also at this celebration that Serena discreetly gives June information about the location of Hannah's school, giving June hope of seeing her once more. However, that small glimmer of alliance between Serena and June is ended when Luke unknowingly exposes Nicole's identity when a video of him at a protest with her goes public, catching the Waterfords' attention. June is forced to call Luke to arrange a meeting between Serena and Nicole. And while in Canada, Serena is urged to come to Canada by Mark Tuolo, the U.S. agent. She is secretly given a phone before leaving for future contact. It is before this visit that June records a cassette tape for Luke, ultimately revealing that Nick is Nicole's father and not Fred, and that Nicole was conceived out of love. This moment was probably heartbreaking, but also somewhat comforting for Luke, as obviously he is finding out his wife has slept with somebody else. But at the same time, this baby is not Fred's, and that has to at least give some sort of ease to him. Serena ultimately betrays June's trust by using the visit as a part of a propaganda campaign to pressure Canada into returning Nicole to Gilead. They make June participate in a live broadcast to Canada, pleading for the return of Nicole. We do get a scene of Luke and Moira watching this happen. In an effort to continue the campaign in getting Nicole back, June, Rita, and the Waterfords travel to Washington, D.C. for a high-profile media campaign urging for Nicole's return. In Washington, the capital of Gilead, the regime's extreme devotion to its oppressive ideology is on full display. Unlike in any other part of the country, handmaids here are subjected to even more brutal restriction. One of the most horrifying being the enforced use of metal rings that pierce their lips to seal their mouths shut. This grotesque symbol of their voicelessness and total subjugation reinforces Gilead's control, ensuring that handmaids are seen but never heard. While in DC, June desperately seeks assistance from neutral Swiss diplomats, hoping they can facilitate a deal to free herself and other oppressed individuals. However, her plans take an unexpected turn when she realizes that Nick, the man she once believed to be her ally and potential savior, has been far more deeply entrenched in Gilead's power structure than she had imagined. Rather than being a hidden resistance fighter working from within, Nick has played a key role in securing Gilead's military victories, an unsettling revelation that forces June to question whether she ever truly knew him at all. This moment marks a significant turning point for June as she grapples with the realization that survival in Gilead is rarely black and white, and even those she once trusted may have been complicit in the very system she seeks to destroy. We also get a moment where Aunt Lydia really shows that she does care for the girls to some capacity in her own twisted way when June asks her, "Do you want us all to be silenced?" And Aunt Lydia says, No, I don't. And then we just see them both crying, and you can really feel that she does care. But then, of course, we have June and Serena. And June and Serena, specifically in this particular season, have a tense conversation in front of the Lincoln Memorial, which has been desecrated by Gilead. Its head and hands removed, symbolizing the regime's erasure of past American values. During their exchange, June confronts Serena about her choices and the consequences of supporting Gilead. She urges Serena to recognize her own suffering under the regime. Serena is visibly conflicted and admits that she wants her daughter Nicole back, even if it means working with the oppressive system that she helped create. June, however, tries to convince Serena that Nicole is better off in Canada, free from Gilead's control. The conversation highlights Serena's internal struggle, torn between the power and status she once fought for and her growing disillusionment with the world she helped build. Meanwhile, June, despite her desperation, remains steadfast in her belief that Nicole's safety and future are more important than Serena's maternal desires. Their confrontation underscores the complexities of power, agency, and regret within Gilead's brutal society. This conversation is charged with tension, resentment, and reluctant understanding between the two women. As I've said before, the show wants us to be deeply invested in their relationship, which is one of the most complex dynamics in The Handmaid's Tale. At times, they are adversaries locked in a power struggle over Nicole and their differing beliefs about motherhood and agency. Yet there are moments where they appear to understand each other better than anyone else. The series repeatedly brings them together in emotionally charged confrontations, forcing the audience to grapple with Serena's role, villain, victim, or something between. Their relationship is built on betrayal, pain, and fleeting moments of uneasy alliance, making each interaction fraught with tension and emotional weight. June literally tells Serena she will never be free of her until both of her children are safe. This scene in front of the ruined Lincoln Memorial encapsulates that complexity. It forces the audience to question whether Serena is capable of redemption and whether June, despite her hatred, still sees a glimmer of humanity in her. Their relationship remains one of the most compelling aspects of the series, keeping viewers emotionally engaged and constantly reassessing where their loyalties lie. Now finally, we have the scene in DC where June kneels to pray, and we see an entire sea of handmaids follow suit, and it is one of the most visually striking and symbolically powerful moments in the series. This moment is layered with meaning. The sheer number of handmaids, all dressed in their signature red robes, creates an overwhelming visual of forced unity, illustrating the scale of Gilead's control and the complete subjugation of women. The way they move in unison at the command of authority reinforces how they have been stripped of their individuality and reduced to mere symbols of obedience. As June kneels, the camera captures a haunting detail, the reflection of the cross in her eyes. This striking visual reinforces the suffocating presence of Gilead's religious extremism, quite literally consuming her vision. It symbolizes how faith, once a source of guidance and hope, has been twisted into an instrument of oppression. The cross in her eyes suggests that Gilead's ideology is inescapable, looming over her thoughts and choices. Yet there is also an intensity in her gaze. Whether it's despair, fury, or quiet defiance is left open to interpretation. But it reminds the audience that despite her forced compliance, June's spirit still remains unbroken. June and Aunt Lydia head back to Gilead as Serena and Fred stay in DC, but once back, June pulls Eleanor Lawrence into her plans to visit Hannah's school, manipulating her fragile mental state to make it happen. But the mission fails and they barely escape. Meanwhile, of Matthew, June's walking partner, betrays Hannah's Martha after seeing June speaking to the Martha at the grocery store. We see Hannah's Martha, Frances, being hung, and June finds out that it was of Matthew's fault. And fueled by rage and grief, June violently attacks of Matthew in public. Of Matthew, who is now being shunned by the handmaids, crumbles under the weight of isolation. She snaps, grabbing a gun in the supermarket, and attempts to assassinate Aunt Lydia. The attempt fails. She's shot down before she can even pull the trigger. Prior to this, we did find out that of Matthew was pregnant, and as a twisted form of punishment, June is forced to sit vigil by of Matthew's hospital bedside for weeks. At this point, there is no return of Matthew. She is simply just a vessel for this baby to be born. This drives June to the edge. She spirals, consumed by anger, even contemplating killing both of Matthew and Serena. She goes as far as stabbing Serena with a syringe. But Janine, of all people, snaps her back to reality, calling her out for her selfishness. Eventually, of Matthew's baby is delivered via C-section, and as she dies, June finds herself more determined than ever to bring Gilead down. This hospital scene was super wild. We just truly saw how much that isolation affected June. Commander Winslow, who Fred attempted to get close to in DC, arrives in Boston. And in a desperate attempt To prove himself, he forces Commander Lawrence to perform the ceremony with June. For a while, Commander Lawrence was getting away with not doing the ceremony, though he is the one who essentially helped build Gilead. He wanted no part in these ceremonies, and now he is being forced to, by the very regime he helped build. This really breaks Commander Lawrence's wife and is the start of her downfall, but it is also this disturbing moment that solidifies just how much power Fred still holds and how much of a danger to June he is. And this is the breaking point. June demands Commander Lawrence help smuggle children out of Gilead. As we are approaching the final episodes of Season 3, Serena is still fixated on getting Nicole back. She pushes Fred towards making a deal with the Americans. But June is still focused on something bigger. Through Jezebel's, she secures a plane for the children to escape, but not before crossing paths with Winslow. When he tries to assault her, she kills him in self-defense. With the help of some Marthas, they clean up the mess and erase any trace of what happened to Commander Winslow. We see June leave Jezebel's in the car of Commander Lawrence, who is now a reluctant, active helper, and he is fueled by his want to get his wife out of Gilead. But Gilead isn't done breaking people. Eleanor Lawrence, already fragile, reaches her breaking point, and June finds her overdosing and does nothing to save her. She lets her die to protect their escape plan, proving just how far she's willing to go for the cause. In another twist, we see Serena betray Fred. She turns him over to the Canadians in exchange for visitation rights to Nicole. And just like that, for the first time in the series, a high-ranking Gilead commander is facing real consequences. And then the finale. With the help of Martha's, handmaids, and allies, June pulls off a massive rescue operation, smuggling dozens of children out of Gilead. In the chaos, she's shot, but keeps going, taking down an airport guard to buy time. The plane makes it out. The children are safe. We see them arrive in Canada with Luke, Moira, and Emily there to meet them. In a heartfelt moment, Rita assures Luke that it was all June. She was the one that made their escape possible. And as for June, we see her collapsed in the woods, seemingly bleeding out. But she's not alone. The other handmaids find her, and the final scene we get is them carrying her away. Gilead isn't finished, and neither is she. Now let's get into some real-world parallels. June's efforts to smuggle children out of Gilead are reminiscent of historical underground movements that saved children from oppressive regimes. The Kindertransport, 1938 to 1939. Jewish children were smuggled out of Nazi Germany to safety in Britain before World War II. And then we have the baby lifts of the Vietnam War in 1975. Thousands of orphans were evacuated from South Vietnam as the country fell to communist rule. Another parallel we have is Eleanor Lawrence's breakdown, which represents the emotional toll that authoritarian regimes and war crimes can have on individuals, especially those who are complicit. Her situation reflects the mental health crisis among women in restrictive environments. Many women married to powerful men in oppressive regimes have struggled with the consequences of their husband's actions, similar to how Eleanor reacts to her husband's role in Gilead. I mean, we literally see her pulling a gun out on Commander Lawrence. And then we have Aunt Lydia, who represents figures in history who enforce oppression while believing they're acting in people's best interests. For example, women have historically played roles in upholding oppressive systems, like the women who worked as guards in the Nazi concentration camps or participated in enforcing strict social norms. Aunt Lydia's belief that she is saving the handmaids reflects how religious fundamentalists have historically justified oppression under the guise of morality. Now, it would not be a Blessed Be the Breakdown episode if we did not compare anything in this season to Trump or Musk. In specific, this episode, I want to talk about Trump's king rhetoric. Donald Trump has repeatedly made statements that suggest he views himself as a king, claiming he has total authority or joking about serving more than 2 terms, just little things here and there. But in specific, when the White House posted the image of him with the caption, "Long live the king," reinforcing an authoritarian ruler-like image. These moments align with a broader pattern of challenging democratic norms and positioning himself as above traditional checks and balances. And this is similar to Gilead's authoritarian rule where commanders act with unchecked power, making unilateral decisions and silencing opposition. Trump's rhetoric and the "long live the king" imagery evoke a similar notion of personal rule, where power is centralized in a single figure rather than distributed through democratic processes. And as we see throughout the show, Gilead systematically dismantles democratic institutions, elevating its leaders to near divine status. Similarly, Trump's language and actions have at times reflected a disregard for democratic norms and checks on executive power, suggesting a preference for absolute control over collaborative governance. And then we have Musk. Recently, Elon Musk demanded that federal employees justify their work or face termination. This echoes the authoritarian control seen in The Handmaid's Tale. In Gilead, obedience is not just expected but enforced through fear, much like Musk's ultimatum, which created uncertainty and panic among workers. And then we have the conflicting directives that they were given. Some employees were being told to comply, others advised against it. And this mirrors the confusion that often arises in totalitarian regimes where power is wielded inconsistently to maintain control. We saw Trump's initial praise of Musk's order, declaring non-responders semi-fired or fired, which what does that even mean? Okay. And it parallels the arbitrary punishment in Gilead, where perceived disloyalty is swiftly met with severe consequences, in this case, being fired. Yet, just as power struggles exist within Gilead's leadership, the Office of Personnel Management later contradicted Trump and Musk, stating that compliance was voluntary. This push and pull between different authorities reflects how authoritarian systems, whether corporate or governmental, rely on fear and unpredictability to maintain dominance. Before I wrap up here, I did want to acknowledge one particular case we saw recently, which was an 11-year-old named Jocelyn Rojo Carranza, who tragically died by suicide on February 8, 2025. Her mother, Maribella, reported that classmates harassed Jocelyn, even threatening to call immigration authorities. Jocelyn's story is a heartbreaking example of how marginalized groups often face systematic discrimination and social exclusion, even at a young age. Children are not born with hate. It is something that they are taught by societal norms, parental influences, and systematic prejudices. In The Handmaid's Tale, Gilead's rigid hierarchy is upheld not just by adults, but by children who are conditioned from birth to accept oppression as normal. The children of Gilead, for instance, are raised to embrace the regime's ideology, never questioning the injustices around them. Similarly, the children who bullied Jocelyn likely absorbed xenophobic beliefs from their surroundings, reflecting how intolerance is passed down through generations. Schools, much like societies with rigid power structures, can become spaces where those deemed different are targeted to reinforce existing hierarchies. Jocelyn's experience highlights how xenophobia and discrimination are not inherent traits, but learned behaviors weaponized to instill fear and maintain control. This story is very tragic, and my heart really goes out to the family, as she was only 11 years old. As Jane Fonda said at the recent Screen Actors Guild Awards, "Make no mistake, empathy is not weak or woke. And by the way, woke just means you give a damn about other people." A whole lot of people are going to be really hurt by what is happening, what is coming our way. Even if they are of a different political persuasion, we need to call upon our empathy and not judge, but listen from our hearts and welcome them into our tent, because we are going to need a big tent to resist successfully what is coming at us. And I will leave it at that. Season 3 really emphasized that oppressive regimes are rarely unbreakable. Resistance movements, internal betrayals, and international accountability can bring down even the most brutal governments. However, the cost of rebellion is high, and many sacrifices are required, just as June learns throughout the season. Thank you all for tuning in to Blessed Be the Breakdown. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, rate, share the podcast, join the discussion on Instagram and TikTok, and let me know your thoughts on Season 3. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and as always, blessed be the fight.